In this video, what we're going to do is do a deep dive into NextJS 13, which was just released literally like yesterday or a couple of days ago. And stay tuned because there's some things that I'm excited about and some things I'm a little disappointed in. So I want to go through some of the stuff and how we can use this, because if you go ahead and just install NextJS 13, I think you're going to find that how do you actually do some of this stuff? And they actually threw a few things out the window, which I think is really going to change the ecosystem, hopefully for the better. I'm a super duper NextJS fan, so I'm excited to implement some of these new features, but walk with me on this one and let's do a deep dive. If you guys are into front-end development, full stack web development, React, NextJS, CSS, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Okay, so what I'm going to do is let's go through some of the stuff NextJS did. Now, the first thing that I just want to get out the way that I'm a little disappointed in is that they did this amazing NextJS conference, which was super duper exciting, and it almost resembled, it was on the level of what Apple does. And they, released NextJS 13 and they announced NextJS 13, super exciting. When you go to install NextJS 13, a lot of the things that they were speaking about just aren't stable. They're not in production. The first thing I did was install NextJS 13 and the stuff isn't there. So let's go through, let's try to install this and let me show you how to actually get this working. The first thing is if you go to NextJS/13, you're gonna see these announcements. Now, this app directory thing is it's really one of the biggest things that's really gonna shift how you're gonna do things, because it's really gonna reorganize your entire app. So while there is a way to incrementally adopt, I think if you see the way this works, you're really going to want to take on new applications with this new method. The things that they're supposed to do is enable an app directory. That's key. The second thing is server-side components. So basically, components inside of the app are going to be server-side, are going to be server components, server React components, not client components. Then they use this other thing called Turbopack, which is in alpha. It's supposed to be super fast. There's some new the next image is stable, something with next font that I'm not too excited about as I saw, and next link has a simplified thing where you no longer have to add the A tag, which is kind of super exciting. So let's go ahead and install this. So what we're gonna do is, if you just install, so we're just gonna do npx create next app at latest. Whoops. At latest, and we're gonna go ahead and get the new. Now let's see the into NextJS 13 tutorial. So we literally just added full-blown, I'm gonna do npm run dev, and let's look at this now. So we have a brand spanking new NextJS version 13, right? If we look at the package JSON, here's one thing, you're gonna see Next 13 and React 18.2. Now what they're saying is that one, some people are still working on React 17. So if you're going to go to Next 13, it's required to have React not only 18, but 18.2. So that's important because there are some apps that haven't really migrated to 18. So that's an important aspect to know. Now, when you open this up, ironically, the first thing to talk about is app directory, but the app directory is not there. So you would think if you install NextJS 13, you're going to see the app directory and start playing. That's what I want to start playing with this app directory, but it still has the pages directory. So it's a little confusing. So you actually have to create the app directory and start playing with it. And when you create this app directory changes a lot of function in a way. So let's get into it. So pages is right here. You have your regular NextJS app. So what we're going to do is, in order to sort of migrate, you could still use, the pages. It'll still be adopted NextJS 13, but you want to move to this app directory. And the reason why I say you do, because if you don't start the app directory, it really changes a lot of things. So let's create a new folder called app. Now this app is essentially going to replace this entire pages directory in a way. And then, so what we're going to do is, once we create that, we're going to say new file. And what you're going to do is create a page.js. So the page.js is representative of the index file. So let's go here and grab what they have here in the pages. So it's export default function page hello next.js, and let's just save that. Now, so if you see when you save, it says the app directory is experimental. Please add experimental app directory true. So one, they're telling you this new function is experimental, and then they tell you that you're at your own risk. So that's a little nerve-wracking for developers, because I don't think we want to be doing anything experimental. But I think if you don't start adopting this, if this really becomes what Next.js will become, it's important to try to start adopting this. So let's go ahead and add what they said to add. Let's go to next config, and then we'll add experimental app directory true. And then I think we'll restart, and we'll do an npm run dev. Now, here we go. Experimental features are not covered. Oop. All right, so we got a little error already because I didn't create everything. All right, so here we are. They're saying conflicting app and page file found. So you have the app page.js and pages index. So the first thing we want to do is we can just delete this pages directory. So literally that's that's it. We can just get rid of it, you know, or if you want to keep it, you can keep it. You just have to get rid of something because it's clashing. So you might have to just change the name of these things and just put them on, you know, put a dash hold. But for me, let's just delete them now. And the next thing is that's required is the app page.js doesn't have a root layout. So here's another thing that's required, which is actually a good thing. Now they adopted like layouts organically inside of Next.js. It's actually was kind of a nightmare to create these layouts and share the layouts across pages. Now they have this built-in way that there's a layout that's a root layout that goes across the entire app, or you could create layouts that are in groups or layouts that are only used in certain routes. So the first thing is you need the layout.js file. Did they just create that? Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't even see that. So they created the layout.js file. Now, so there it is. So these are the two essentials to move into Next.js 13. The app directory, layout.js, page.js is like the index file pretty much. I really don't like the name page.js. Something about it doesn't sit right with me. I really think like us as web developers, we're used to index or default, but page is representative of Next.js's default page, and that's important. So you need a page and you need a layout.js. That's going to be basically replacing your underscore app, what will used to be the underscore app, which is nice because it kind of feels pretty cool. Now, this root layout, the other thing is it has to have this. So the root layout should be called root layout, and it needs to have HTML, doesn't need the head tag, but it needs to have a body. So that's core. That's a new thing that you need to make sure you require. The page.js will just be your regular old component. Now, here's the big change that I see. Everything inside the app directory is server components first, which is huge because React has server components and client components now. Now I don't remember if it's fully stable, but it's being used here. So in the app directory, it's server components first. Every component, every page you make, every route is considered a server component. In order for it to be client, you actually need to specify it to be a client manually. So what does a server component mean? I'm not gonna get into a deep dive into that. I mean, it's gonna run on the server obviously, but the point is that the difference is server is going to be mostly for your data fetching, and your client is going to be, which I think is gonna be hard to adopt because now you have to find a way to split your code. You have to find a way to say, okay, your client components are you can't use state, any of those use hooks inside of the server components. But now the server components are default. You know, so all right, so let's get into that. Now let's just do this right now. So look here, if you do a console log, here's how you'll know, right? So if you do console log, hello world, and if I inspect this, right, if we go to the console, let me refresh this. You see nothing here, nothing got printed because this is it's not going to the client. You'll see here, it got printed in the terminal. So all this ran on the server. It's not going to the client, right? It's not there. It's not, you know, so that to me is a short, easy way. If you want to know, is this a server component or is this a client component? Try console log and see, hey, it doesn't even go to the browser. So that's how you know. So these are by default. Now, I don't remember if you can make a page a client, but generally anything you want to make a client component will be, you'll just say use client. Now let's see if this works. I don't know if you can do it on the page component, but let's just see. Okay, so you see now, I just wanted to show you, look now when we hit that refresh, we said use client, You see the console log now shipped to the browser. So now we know this is a client component now, and you could use state, use effect, you could do all that stuff. So essentially you're going to use your server components, which is, again, that's the default now on any component in the app directory. That's going to be your data fetching, anything you want to do. You want to make it a client component using use client. If you're going to do more, so they have like a list there on NextJS app, if NextJS website, if you're gonna do things that are like interactive, client-based, you need to use effect, you need to use state, you need to like on clicks, event listeners. Okay, but now it's cool because now it's your choice. All right, so now I'm gonna just go ahead and delete this, and let's go ahead and continue. So that's the app directory. Okay, that's how your app is structured. We can create a nav, right? So let's go inside of here and let's create a new folder called components, and let's create a new folder called nav, and then in there let's create a new file called nav.js, and then I'll try to avoid making too many you could do a CSS module there, but let's go into the nav component, and I have here, I'm copying and pasting what I've written already. All right, I'm gonna go ahead, let me get rid of some of this stuff right now, and I'll show you the next. Let's get rid of some of the stuff that's here. Let's get rid of some of this stuff. Okay, so now we have a nav component for now, and I'm just gonna say, let's say ul li home, and let's say about. Okay, so we have a nav here, and let's see, maybe we'll just go ahead and create a CSS module file. So it's gonna be nav.module.scss. Oh, I actually have to install my SCSS, so let me actually quit install sass, so npm I sass. Now if we go to this layout, what we can do is we can actually import the nav right into this layout. Okay, now we've imported the nav, and now we can keep this children, move it, and add nav, and move the children down below. And now you see here, this is up here as a, and again, obviously this is so ugly, we can make this so beautiful, but I'm just gonna leave it as is just to show you the structure. Same thing, we can do the same thing and create children. Okay, let's do another footer just so I can show you how this can move in and out. So let's create another component folder called footer. So now it's just a footer, so we'll go into the layout, we'll import the footer, and then we'll put it down here. So footer, there we have it right here. So this should be pushed down, but then we should probably add here something, you know, whatever. This is not meant to be, you have to structure all this your own way, and you'll have to be doing different things with the CSS. But now the point here is we have a root layout that's going to be shared across the globe. Okay, then what we're going to do here is let's go ahead and create another page. So now let's say we want an about page, right? So let's go ahead and create a new folder. I'll call it about, which could be a route. You can make it about.js, but we're gonna make it, and now inside there you want to call it page.js. So if it's gonna be your about, you can either name it about.js, but it's better to structure your app in this way, and then you want to do page.js. That's gonna be the default. All right, so what we're gonna do is just go ahead and create another default page. So let's go ahead and take the about, let's name it about. Now, just so I know what this is, let's say this is hello about, let's just call it about. So let's just say about page. And then let's say for the main home, let's call this home, so we can see the difference. Let's get rid of the hello world and let's go back. Okay, there it is. So there's the about page, and then there's the home page. So now you see that it's shared the same layout, right? So now that's cool, because I was doing this super manual. I was really creating layouts manually before in Next.js 12. Now it's really built in, and then you can make multiple layouts. Basically, if we decide to make another layout, you can add another layout.js file inside of this folder, and that layout will actually become a layout inside of that route. That's pretty cool. And there's other ways to actually do shared layouts among multiple routes. But so if we have page.js, layout.js, and here we are. So now let's do one more thing before we move on. which is they have now, I don't want to get too deep into it because I'm not that excited about it, but they have a loading.js file. So by default, your route can have a layout, can have a page, can have an error.js, a loading.js, which basically as it's moving, it'll just load whatever's in your loading.js file, and a head.js file, which that I think is super important. So if we go to new file and we do head.js, that's where you can put, basically you're just exporting a function, and it is essentially just, your meta and your title, of whatever's in that route. Okay, so if you see here, let's see, if we go refresh, see, it says now hello world, right? So now this is cool. This was super needed. I'm excited about this, is that the head.js file, now you can put things in there. That's what you typically need to do inside of, a regular old website. And now that we get that, so now I won't go too deep. There's error.js and there's loading.js, and they're pretty simple. When I tried the loading.js, what I didn't like about it, I didn't like to see loading all the time. Keep in mind, these nav and these footer components are still are React server components. They're not client components. So if here we do a console.log in the footer, for example, you're not going to see that ship to the browser, right? Let's check it out. Nothing came to the console. So now let's go back up here and let's look at the link component, or the image. We could look at that next, but I'm gonna look at the next link component so we can, link up this navigation. So let's go ahead and import the link component. Now this is pretty important with the link component, import from next link. And then what we want to do here is link. This is pretty easy. And then we'll do home. Now this is key. Now if you click save, it'll crash because we need an href. So let's say href equals home. And then for this guy, we will just do about. And then we'll do the about. Okay, so now we have navigation linked. Now here's the key difference. And this confused a lot of people. You used to have to add an empty A tag inside of the link component, but now the link component in Next.js 13 will do that for you. So you do not want to add an A tag, and it'll do it. So if we go home, about, look at that, super fast. It's like loading almost instantly. The footer and the nav is not re-rendering. Now let's go to the next image, which is stable here. So let's say we want to let's go to the page, like let's say the home page, the main page here. And let's actually add a wrapping parent so we can continue on adding some more stuff. Let's import image from next image. Okay. Now what we'll do here is, actually, let me go ahead and put a few, two images I have here inside there. I put these two images from Unsplash, and let's go ahead and let's try to implement these. Okay, so let's go ahead and import this next image. The image component finally does not need to have width and height if your image is local, if it's in the file directory. If it's remote, then you need to either specify width and height, or you need to create object fit cover, right, as React. Just import it as photo from, and I'm looking for the images again, and I'm just using it locally. Let me refresh here so you can see. Yeah, here's the images folder, and there we have it. So import photo, no errors. Now we have this photo locally. Now when we have it locally, we can do an image, and we do not need to specify width and height, which is super exciting. So let's go to photo. But we do need alt for accessibility. So let's say alt, and here we have it. Let's go back home because that's where it is, and there it is. Now, if you look here, again, it's just a whole super duper long image, right? Now, of course, inside of, you could add a class, and that's what I'll do now. I'll add a class called whatever you want to call it, but I'm going to call it class styles. I'm just going to call it. Now, there you go. There you go. So now we have this. Now, this is super cool. You have the image without specifying width and height. It did it on its own. And the reason why I calculated it is because Next was able to do it because the image is local. So it's able to to do that and pre-render it with the width and height. If this was being pulled, if this URL is sort of being pulled from somewhere else, like, you know, and you're specifying it from another, you know, CMS or something like that, then that's where you get into the whole, you need to add layout equals fill, you might want to do object fit cover, you know, the whole thing, do width and height. But this is really cool. So if you can do that, you just want to do that. And that's exciting. To me, that's super, just having not to avoid the width and height to me is huge. Cool. So that's exciting. These to me are some of the most exciting things about it. Now, they have a new thing called Next Font. I played with this. It's in beta. I'm not super excited about it. I don't have a lot of problems importing Google fonts. I have another video on how to do that, or importing fonts from Typekit. You could do that right in your CSS. Now, probably using Next Font is going to be more fast. It's going to be optimized because it's going to import everything inside of your app, and it won't make the calls, you know, out to these, you know, to Google or to Typekit or whatever. Now for the Turbopack Alpha, that's something I can't really speak to be honest with you, and a message to the NextJS team. I have to say, this is supposed to be 700 times faster, meaning the builds are supposed to be super duper. I mean, 700 times, it seems like it's an exaggeration. And to be honest, when I've been playing with NextJS 13, I haven't seen that much speed. And to be honest, and again, I don't know if I'll see it locally that much, but I have been seeing a lot of crashing. Which is ironic. As I'm playing with things, refreshing the page, I have been seeing it sort of hang a lot, which I've never seen prior, which is weird because Turbopack is not only supposed to be good, it's supposed to be super duper faster, you know, and optimized. So I don't know what's up with that exactly. I'm a little disappointed in that, but I'm going to give them time, and I'm sure that at some point this will get super better. Is NextJS pretty much getting rid of get static props, get server side props, the whole thing that we feel like NextJS was predicated on. But get server side props we're supposed to be able to hydrate an HTML page by pulling data. But you know, the whole ecosystem has been in limbo because React itself has been working on, for many years now, React server components where you can do data fetching and, you know, get the data as, you know, prior to things rendering. So now that that's in place, now NextJS is incorporating that, and now in NextJS 13, the default for all components inside of an app directory are server components, not client components. The bad thing is we have a lot of refactoring to do. The good thing is you can pretty much fetch data anywhere, and it's a little more seamless. So you're not going to be as worried. Like, can I fetch here? And like, can I cache here? Can I get the server side prop? Pretty much now it's all wrapped into one fetch function. And I've always been a fan of fetch. And I remember prior even telling people, I think we should just stick with fetch because that is what the browser API does. But now they've actually incorporated fetch as the core way of getting data, whether it's static, whether it's server side. So let's get into it. All right. So this right here is now the new way that you will fetch data from anywhere inside of the components or pages that are not client components. You import the use from React, which this has been seen as being confused with use hook. It's not that kind of hook. It's called use. And they said in the conference you can equate it to await. It's sort of like a way to await the function. It gives the component the ability to, you know, async await kind of the data. But it's called use. You do your async function and then you get it into the page, into your component, and then you could use it. Now this is a server component, and that could be any old React component. It could be a page component. It could be a layout component inside of NextJS 13. What you do is when you fetch, they basically use these other object options to equate themselves to what was previously done. So get static props, which is what we know. It says this request should be cached until manually invalidated. So basically it'll just be cached all the time until the cache gets busted. So it'll basically be like, you know, static generation. Then you have this request. This is the get server side props, which is basically never, you know, caches, but it pulls and things like that. If you want it to be cached for X amount of time, you'll be using the revalidate. So that's it. So, but it's all basically a fetch. So what we'll do is I'm going to go into a nav component because I want to show you how you can use, you can go in the layout component, but I want to show you can go into like any old component where you felt that you couldn't do, you know, client side with. So if you go right into nav, you always felt like, oh, this was a place where I can't really fetch data because it's a client component. Well, now all the components are server components everywhere. So unless you specify use client on here. So now let's just try to fetch right in here. So if we go ahead, let's import the use. Make sure everything's working here. Yep. All right, so no errors. We're going to import the use. And then we're going to create the async function. I'm going to use, and you can put it actually outside of the component itself. So that's interesting, right? So we're not even putting this function inside. We're putting it outside of the, you know, export function component. And I'm just calling this get blog post. And it's just a typical old fetch. We're just fetching, I'm just fetching, you know, this guy, this fake JSON placeholder, which a lot of, you know, people use. You know, it's just a bunch of fake JSON here and res, and we're, you know, getting the JSON and calling it posts. And then that's already now used if we make a const inside of the component. We're not even giving it props, right? Because props was more of a client-side thing. We had to kind of get the data and then pass it as prop. You can still pass data as props throughout different components. But in this case, as a server component, you're good to go. Once this is there, this component will have the data and you don't have to worry. So there it is. So we're saying const posts, and if we refresh here, so we're just getting this async function, waiting it, and then using it over here, get the blog post, converting it to posts. And now let's refresh. And now let's just do a console log of that console log posts. And there you're seeing it right here. And now because this is server side component, if I show you the inspect element right here, you don't see it here in the browser because this is a pure server component, a React server component, which everything inside the app directory is. So now you're good. You could use this anywhere you want, right? So you can use it right inside the page. So let's just take, let's look at this for example. Let's see if we just literally take posts. We'll just do the first item in the array and let's just say title. There we have it, right? So just to show that that's being used in the nav, and now we're doing this fetch in the nav. You can do this fetch anywhere. You can create these dashboards. This is what makes NextJS 13. And really, we have to congratulate the React team because the server components of React is what really empowered and infused NextJS to go to that next level of sort of saying, hey, we can get rid of these things that we kind of created on our own to server side to kind of like get things on the server. Now we can still do server side rendering, but we can use React server components. And now you can create things where there's multiple React components, you know, in the app, and everything is kind of doing its sort of own thing without having a problem. Anything could become this component that can fetch data. And if you just need client function, then it won't be a server component. And the problem that I see, the only thing that I see where it might need refactoring, might get a little confusing, is that most client components still need data. So you're going to find a way of balancing the two. And I think as you build your app, you'll find out, well, what should I make a server component? What should I make a client component? I was wondering, well, how do you actually do what was get static paths if you want to do static generation, but then you need the path. And I think it's, here it is. It's called generate static params. These guys, that's a mouthful. Basically, this will be what was get static paths. So you're still going to be doing your fetch in the same way you'll do it, but for get static paths, you're going to be exporting this function, which will give you the dynamic. Tell me what you guys think about this. Is this cool? Are you nervous about these Next.js sort of functions going away and just kind of going back to fetch? And it's kind of simplified a lot. It's now you just have fetch, and then you can just have another option to decide whether you're going to be doing like caching or no caching. So it's kind of cool that it's kind of streamlining back into what feels a little more organic. If you guys like React, Next.js, front-end development, full-stack development, CSS, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. See you guys in the next one.